So I felt that Eugen's service last week invited me into a new world. Maybe for many of you also, it stimulated new experience and new awareness. He touched several important themes. Today, the part I want to explore further is Eugen's call to us to run to meet the glory.
네.
I guess, like me, many of you were moved by that and really want to do that. But likely, you find something often stops you. That's what I want to explore, in hopes that it will open the window to glory for us more consistently. So the day after, actually the morning after Eugen's service, I really enjoyed looking out the window here at birds as rays of God's light. Also the trees and the mountains, even through the air pollution. Eugen's experience of opening his heart opened a channel for new awareness, not just in Eugen, but in many of us. The death of our little street cat Fluffy could have brought only sadness, but through Eugen's heart, it brought magic. That filled me with a sense of how differently we can see things if our hearts vibrate at a high enough level. We can look with new eyes, and we can see beyond what is visible. Eugen described that as the glory of all things is waiting for us exceedingly. I sense this ability to see the glory, regardless of what else is present, is going to be very important, especially in the days ahead. What stops us from seeing the glory? As I pondered this, two things came to mind. Sad, tragic things, and also the history we carry of being hurt. As I said, what Eugen opened in his heart changed my world.
네.
Feeling how that happened, I realized if Fluffy had not died, this new sense of glory that Eugen opened for us
네.
also would not have happened. So I realized Fluffy did not die in vain. In fact, he was glorified. That caused me to think that many times when sad or even tragic things happen, if we could see with greater sensitivity, we might see how heaven immediately begins to transform even unfortunate events into a cycle to bring blessing. Probably all of you remember the murder of the Black American George Floyd. His last words, "I can't breathe," gave rise to a movement to rectify racial oppression in America and the world.
네.
Many people said he did not die in vain. Some people think heaven causes such tragedies, but to me, believing that heaven or God causes tragedies denies our own responsibility for such events. Usually we don't personally cause tragedies, but mankind's attitude and actions as a whole bring about many destructive events. So this destructiveness by many in society builds. And that, along with the pressure that people feel also building, sometimes flips people to do insane, heinous things. Like the recent murder of Asian Americans and 2 other people in Atlanta. The person who commits the crime is responsible. But how many others played a part in that crime? Through thoughtless comments inciting racial hatred and other kinds of hatred. There is so much darkness, destruction, and despair in our world. You might wonder, how can I find the glory in that? Years ago, someone gave me an intriguing picture that I think gives a hint to this. Try to hold this where you can see it. Okay, so hopefully you can see that the room is destroyed, and then also outside the room looks like it's been destroyed. And yet, this, can you see this as a person? Sees something beyond the destruction. To me, this blue globe looks like a seed for the new world. And it looks like she's giving an attunement to that. So what if, when something sad or even tragic, unfortunate and tragic happened, very soon we began to watch for how heaven will transform that into blessing? Wouldn't that change our world? Actually, it would provide heaven with a channel to transform the event into blessing, just like Eugen did with Fluffy's death. So I'm not suggesting that there isn't a time for grieving. There is a right time for grieving, but we don't have to stop there. Our heart can look to heaven, and gradually we can feel heaven beginning to bring a blessing. So no matter how destructive something is, as a minimum, God will use it to cleanse and purify. If there's a channel for God to act, it will be used to clarify and uplift also. Isn't that what we see happening with the death of George Floyd and also others? So when our hearts vibrate at a higher level and our pneumoplasm rises, it gives us greater sensitivity. And that opens awareness of what actually is present, but at higher invisible ranges. The glory that wants to come to us just as quickly as our hearts open to respond. So even when there are sad or tragic events, we can find the glory in them. The second thing that stops us from seeing the glory is the history we carry of being hurt. Probably you have noticed that even with people that you really love and respect, at times there are misunderstandings. And if that continues, the tension and discomfort between you can actually greatly diminish your connection. I'm thinking about some of those in some of the people I love. And also in my experience. So one reason that such things go on so long and also feel so tough and break relationships is because of this pain that we carry of unhealed history of being hurt. When we're very young, I mean like very young, we don't have much history of being hurt.
Right.
Usually, there's a natural innocence that we're born with. We could call that the first innocence. So as we experience things that hurt us, gradually most people build walls of protection around their hearts. But those walls also prevent us from seeing the glory. So as adults, there is a second innocence that we can deliberately cultivate in ourselves. And the innocence I'm speaking of is the lack of guile. Another way to say that is not manipulating or judging. Eugen spoke of running to meet the glory that so much wants to meet us. To do that, we need an innocent heart. Sometimes we see something of that in films. I've been especially touched by films that show the actual reunion of Korean family members after being separated for decades because of the Korean War or the DMZ. you see two people meet again after a very long time.
네.
And you see two people at a distance, gradually coming closer.
네.
And at a certain point, they run to meet each other.
네.
And they embrace with such love, you can almost feel their hearts melting. They're so relieved to at last reunite.
네.
And you can feel how precious they are to each other.